The Battle Cats has many enemies, some of them that are cool looking or just annoying to deal with, but one thing about an enemy that I'll always have is its inspirations and the description that an enemy carries. For example, Snake breaks the fourth wall by the fact that despite using water paint, it isn't relevant to the game is quite humorous, but I think the most interesting enemy connections involve the Advent bosses and how the two tiers of Advent bosses are polar opposites in terms of themes. In this video, I'm going to talk about how the Advent bosses are all linked to the 7 deadly sins and the 7 holy virtues of Christianity. However, as of 11.6, not all tier 1 Advent enemies have a counterpart yet. For those enemies, their section will be shorter. If you thought this video was interesting, why not give it a like and hit the subscribe button if you really enjoy the content on my channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss an upload. And leave a comment down below on which connection you thought was the most interesting. With that out of the way, let's start connecting. To start us off is the Cleonal family of bosses. The cruel Cleonal angel is a mother of 3. However, her description talks about how she brings destruction to wherever she is present. From her overprotectiveness over her children, killing everything in its path, even if it doesn't pose a threat to her or her children, is representative of the sin of wrath. Wrath is usually described as when anger is directed at an innocent person or when their anger desires an extreme punishment. In her case, that involves killing everything in sight. In the case of Death Angel Xeonal, whose description notes that she survived the mass extinction caused by our planet's ocean being polluted. In its Japanese description, it is mentioned that no matter how many times the universe tries to kill her family, she's always willing to self-sacrifice herself to protect her children from harm. This idea of self-sacrifice reflects the virtue of charity, as her unconditional love for her children means that she's willing to die over and over and over again just to keep her children safe from harm. Next up is the big, round book carriers of Daboo the Dead and Heavenly Herald Papoo. Daboo's father had told Daboo that the best way to live life as a zombie is to get yourself educated. However, instead of striving to get an excellent education, Daboo would much rather overindulge himself in thrashy horror comics. For Daboo, he displays the sin of gluttony, as he would much rather waste most of his time reading comics instead of trying to spend his time more wisely by getting an education. On the flip side, Papoo carries a textbook on how to be an archangel, and since her archangel exam is arriving soon, she carries her textbook everywhere so that she can study at any time she isn't doing anything else. This is representative of the virtue of diligence, as her persistence on working on being the best at the exam so she can become a great archangel shows that her work ethic is strong. Next is the mask duo with Hanya and Black Okame. Hanya is a shy boy that was possessed by a mask that turns one into a flesh-eating demon. In its description, it states that the breath that huffs out whenever it attacks is nothing but pure corruption that is filled with vengeful hate. Those who commit acts of vengeance usually do so because of extreme feelings of envy, which is one of the 7 deadly sins. Those who are very envious commit acts that are very harmful due to feelings of jealousy, and jealousy could transform into feelings of vengeance. For Black Okame, on the other hand, she represents the virtue of chastity. Chastity is described as a virtue to abstain from sexual activity, and in Black Okame's description, describes her having the image of innocent maidenhood, as those who do practice chastity are seen as pure and innocent from unlawful sexual activity. Keep in mind that according to the church, unlawful sexual activity is sexual activity that is done without the intent of concepting a child. Now we have the 2 bees. Queen Bee is described as a princess that was exiled, presumably from a beehive, and now rules a gang in the streets of a big city. However, in her Japanese description, she is described to be abandoned by her mother, who was the hostess bee, presumably in an entertainment district, since that's where it's described as where Queen Bee rules. From her wanting to have all control over her subjects to her stage name being Honey Trap, which is a stratagem which involves using someone who is attractive to lure a victim into a false relationship, she represents the sin of lust. While lust is usually related to describe sexual desire, the sin of lust simply means having an intense desire for something, whether that is for sex, money, or power. On the flip side, we have Queen Mother the Fifth, who is a very old bee, described as being involved in a dancing scene for 888 years. According to her description, many of the drone bees say that she is the true ruler of the hive. If this is the case, then the drones must revere her. From her old age to the fact that she is loved by the hive represents the virtue of patience. The virtue of patience is required for a strong leader, and since she is well beloved by the hive, and the fact that old age tends to mold a lot of people into having a ton of patience. Another aspect of patience is the fact that one must be able to make peace with their surroundings and to have mercy on those who tend to react to situations with disrespect and anger. One last thing, she has the longest curse duration in the game, and this can also be reflective in the fact that she represents the virtue of patience. As in, you have to wait patiently in order for the curse effect to go away. Next is the 2 dogs who got the extravagant seating. King Wawa's description mentions that his kid brother, later to be revealed as Everlord Wanwan, is more famous than him due to a reality TV show, despite him earning the crown to become an earl in whatever kingdom he is from over his great military service and advancement of the sciences. Due to his massive ego and him being annoyed at his brother for being more famous than he is for something he feels isn't worthy, this reflects the sin of pride. Pride is usually considered the deadliest of the 7 sins, as this can lead to people being overconfident and arrogant. According to Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18, it states that pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. People that are overly prideful are usually described as having hubris. On the other side of the dog coin is Wanwan. Wanwan is extremely good at conversation, so good in fact that simply a few sweet words from him can make people see stars. This metaphor simply means that words that Wanwan uses in conversations are words that are most likely very kind. Kindness just so happens to be one of the 7 holy virtues, and kindness is considered to be one of the most important virtues that anyone can have, as it's one of the main topics discussed in the Bible. The last duo is the Baku twins. Baku is described as a perpetual sleepwalker. On some nights, she wanders the town she resides in and has extremely loud snores, making people extremely startled, and she does it without any care about it when she does it due to her sleepwalking. From her perpetual sleepwalking to startling those with her snores without taking consideration from others, Baku represents the sin of sloth. Sloth is the hardest sin to define, as it can mean so many different things. However, a generally accepted definition of sloth is that when a person is too inactive for too long, they get too bored, sluggish, or become apathetic to others. Baku specifically represents the apathy part of the sin of sloth. Doremi, on the other hand, is a professional baby with 7 years on her belt. She has gotten so good at fake crying that she can put others in a state of calm and is able to put those with the most hostile emotions straight to sleep. Because of these traits, she represents the virtue of humility. Her cries bring those who have hostile emotions or people who are full of themselves back to being grounded in reality by removing their clouded state of mind to see the world for what it really is. Next is Pugsley's Comet. Since he has yet to receive a variant, there is no counterpart to discuss the virtue of temperance, so I will quickly go through what that is now. Temperance is being able to moderate the attraction of pleasures. In other words, it means being able to have self-restraint. Now to Pugsley. His sin is greed. His Japanese description talks about how Pugsley will roll at ridiculous speeds to acquire shiny objects. This is a proponent of greed, as Pugsley is already relatively famous, yet his greed makes him unable to stop chasing for things, even if it will be his downfall. Lastly, while not representing any of the 7 deadly sins, it's also important to talk about the possessed empress and how she mirrors original sin. The event name that the possessed empress is found in is called Temptation Symphony. Princess Cat was attempting to search for knowledge to the point that it became obsessive. In her quest for knowledge, she opened up a cursed grimoire that tempted her to unleash the Aku and was possessed with evil from the book. For those who don't know, a grimoire is essentially a textbook for magic. This somewhat mirrors the story of Adam and Eve. In the Garden of Eden, Adam is told that he can eat any of the fruits from any tree, excluding a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. However, Eve is tempted by a serpent, who is sometimes described as the devil, to consume the fruit from the tree, in which she does, mirroring the image for falling for temptations. This causes the two to be banished from the Garden of Eden, and since they were described as the first humans in the Bible, this is the first sin of humanity, which is why it's called the original sin. That concludes this video. The Battle Cats has a lot of interesting lore behind its enemies and cat units. The Advent bosses are simply a set of enemies that are very interesting lore-wise. If you enjoyed this video, then why not give it a like and maybe leave a comment down below on what connection you thought was the most interesting. If you enjoyed the content on this channel, why not hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so you don't miss an upload. And if you're feeling extra generous, why not give some thanks. Anyways, have a wonderful day.